Have you ever believed your family was united, only to discover that a single secret could tear everything apart? This is the untold true story of my grandfather, a story that began with his will reading and ended with a secret that divided the family forever. Before I share it with you, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who love mysterious, emotional journeys. The morning of the will reading was gray and rainy, the kind of weather that presses down on your chest and makes every step feel heavier. I stood outside the law office, clutching my umbrella, watching the rivulets of water snake down the windows. My heart was pounding, not only from grief for my grandfather's passing, but also from the tension that hung thick in the air about my entire family was gathered there. My uncle, sharp-suited and restless, with the kind of smirk that made you feel like he already knew something you didn't. My cousins, whispering among themselves, their eyes darting toward the office door as if treasures were waiting inside. My grandmother, dressed in her familiar black shawl, her face drawn and pale, lips moving silently in what I thought were prayers. But when I looked closer, it didn't feel like prayer. It felt like fear. I tightened my grip on my grandfather's cane, the only thing I thought I had inherited. It was old, polished smooth from decades of use, but worthless compared to the property, money, and land everyone else was expecting. At that moment, I thought I had been forgotten. Little did I know that this cane would later reveal a secret hidden for generations. The door creaked open, and Mr. Harris, the family lawyer, stepped out. His gray hair was neatly combed back, and his glasses sat low on his nose. He looked at all of us and cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging outside. "Please, come in. Today, we honor the wishes of your late father, grandfather, and husband. What he left behind will be revealed." We filed into the office. The atmosphere inside was just as heavy as the sky outside. Bookshelves lined the walls, stacked with thick legal volumes, and on the desk sat a large envelope sealed with red wax. Mr. Harris took his seat behind the desk, folded his hands, and let the silence stretch. Finally, he spoke. "Your grandfather was a man of tradition and secrets. He left not only possessions, but also instructions. Specific instructions." A ripple of unease passed through the room. My uncle leaned forward eagerly. My cousins exchanged wide-eyed looks. My grandmother's lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Harris broke the seal on the envelope. He began reading aloud, "To my beloved family, if you are hearing this, it means I am gone. What I leave behind is not just wealth or land, but truths that you may not be ready for. Some of you will find comfort in my words. Others may find pain. But above all, remember, family is more than inheritance. It is built on love, loyalty, and truth." My chest tightened as I listened. My grandfather had always been a man of wisdom, but his voice carried a weight I had never heard before. Mr. Harris continued, distributing envelopes and announcing bequests. "My uncle received farmland and machinery. My eldest cousin received the old family cottage. Another cousin inherited jewelry, passed down through generations." The room buzzed with whispered calculations and hidden smiles. And then silence. My name hadn't been called. I sat there, my palms sweating, my heart sinking. Did he really leave me nothing? Mr. Harris cleared his throat again. "Finally," he said, "to my grandchild, he leaves something different." He reached under the desk and brought out a long, slender package. He placed it in front of me with careful hands. I opened it, and inside was the same cane I already carried. Laughter erupted. My cousins sneered. My uncle chuckled. "A cane? That's it?" Maybe he thought you needed help standing up for yourself. Their mockery stung. My face burned with embarrassment. But my grandmother, she didn't laugh. Instead, she looked stricken, as though the sight of that cane had pulled the ground from beneath her. I clutched it tightly, forcing myself not to react. Mr. Harris looked at me with eyes that seemed to say, "There's more. Be patient." Friends, pause for a moment. Imagine this. You sit in a room where everyone is receiving wealth and property, and all you get is a cane. Would you feel betrayed? Or would you wonder if there's a hidden meaning? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe and like. It truly helps these untold stories reach more people. The reading continued, but my attention was elsewhere. My fingers traced the smooth wood of the cane. Something about it felt strange. The weight, the balance, as though it wasn't just wood. Meanwhile, the room was unraveling. My uncle demanded to know why the farmland he received wasn't larger. One cousin argued about the value of the cottage. Another accused the lawyer of favoritism. My grandmother finally spoke, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "You should all be ashamed. Your father is barely in his grave, and all you care about is what you've gained." Her words silenced them for a moment. But beneath that silence, I could feel tension mounting. Secrets lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mr. Harris then reached for a small drawer in his desk. He pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it gently in front of me. His voice lowered. "This was left for you alone. Your grandfather insisted you open it only in my presence." My breath caught. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you are reading this, then you are the only one I trust. This cane holds more than what it seems. When the time is right, you will discover what I hid. Do not trust anyone, not even those closest to you. Especially your grandmother." The words hit me like a thunderclap. My hands trembled. I looked up, and for a fleeting second, my grandmother's eyes met mine. Her face went pale. She quickly looked away. The room erupted again, everyone demanding to know what the note said. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. "It's personal," I muttered, but inside I was shaking. Why would my grandfather warn me not to trust my grandmother? The lawyer closed the reading with final words, but I barely heard him. My thoughts spun wildly. The cane, the letter. My grandmother's reaction. Something was hidden here. Something that could tear the family apart. As we left the office, the storm outside had calmed, but the storm inside me was only beginning. That night, I sat in my room staring at the cane. I tapped it against the floor absent-mindedly, and to my shock, I heard a hollow sound. My heart leapt. I twisted the handle, and with a faint click, a small compartment slid open. Inside, folded tightly, was a second letter. My breath caught. I pulled it out with trembling hands. "If you found this, it means you are ready. The truth about this family lies in a room I built long ago. A room of truth. The key to it is with Mr. Harris. Go to him. Do not delay. Once the door is opened, everything will change forever." I sat frozen, the letter clutched in my hands. My grandfather had planned this for years, maybe decades. A hidden room? A secret truth? And the warning about my grandmother echoed in my mind. What was she hiding? If you think this story is already shocking, just wait. Because in the next chapter, I discover the key to the room of truth, and what my grandmother does next will leave you speechless. Before we continue, don't forget, subscribe, like, share this video with friends who love family mysteries, and leave a comment. What do you think is hidden inside the room my grandfather built? Imagine this. You open a hidden letter from your grandfather, and inside it says you can't trust anyone, not even your grandmother. What would you do? Today, I'll take you deeper into the untold true story of my grandfather. And before we continue, Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment below, because this secret is only getting darker. The night after the will reading, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandfather's face, stern yet kind, as if he were watching me even now. The letter hidden inside the cane burned in my pocket. Its words kept repeating in my head. Do not trust anyone, especially your grandmother. That line wouldn't leave me. Why her? She had been the pillar of the family for as long as I could remember. Quiet, dignified, strict at times, but always present. Why would my grandfather, her own husband, write such a thing? Morning came with a dull gray light spilling through my curtains. I sat at my desk, staring at the cane resting across my lap. I twisted the handle again, opened the hollow compartment, and reread the letter. The truth about this family lies in a room I built long ago, a room of truth. The key to it is with Mr. Harris. Go to him. Do not delay. The words chilled me. It wasn't just a family squabble over land or money. This was something bigger, something hidden deliberately, something my grandfather didn't want the others to find. I decided to visit Mr. Harris as soon as possible. But when I arrived at his office, I wasn't alone. My uncle's car was already parked outside. My stomach knotted. What was he doing there? I waited until he left, his face red with anger, muttering under his breath, before stepping inside. Mr. Harris greeted me calmly, as though he'd been expecting me. You found the letter, didn't you? He asked. I froze. How did you know? He leaned back in his chair. Your grandfather prepared me for this day years ago. He told me that when the time was right, you'd come here, and I would give you something. From his drawer, he took out a small rusted key attached to a faded leather tag. Etched into the tag was a single word: study. He placed it in my hand. This is what your grandfather left for you. Use it wisely. Once you open that room, there's no going back. I stared at the key, heavy in my palm. My pulse quickened. Mr. Harris, I whispered. Why did he warn me about my grandmother? For the first time, I saw unease in his eyes. He adjusted his glasses. That, he said slowly, is something you'll have to see for yourself. But remember, secrets are like fire. They burn, and once lit, they can't be put out. I left his office with the key clenched tightly in my fist, my heart pounding in my ears. Friends, pause for a moment. What would you do if your grandfather left you a mysterious key and a warning not to trust your own grandmother? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, if this story has you hooked, hit subscribe and like. Your support keeps these untold true stories alive. That evening, I drove to my grandfather's house. The family estate stood at the edge of town, its windows dark, its walls heavy with memories. The air was damp and still, and every creak of the wooden porch seemed louder than it should have been. Inside, the house smelled of dust, wood, and old secrets. I moved carefully through the halls, my footsteps muffled by worn carpets. The portraits of ancestors stared down at me from the walls, their painted eyes sharp and judgmental. I found myself in the study, my grandfather's sanctuary. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with history, law, and philosophy. His desk was polished, though untouched since his passing. And there, in the far corner, behind a faded rug, was the outline of a small hidden door. My breath caught. This was it. I pulled the rug aside, revealing the door's iron lock. My hands trembled as I slid the key into place. For a moment, it stuck. Then, with a heavy click, it turned. The door creaked open, and a rush of cold air spilled out. A staircase led down into darkness. I hesitated. My grandfather's warning echoed again. Do not trust anyone. But I had to know. I descended slowly, my phone's flashlight guiding the way. At the bottom was a narrow room, The room of truth. It was filled with old boxes, stacks of papers, and shelves covered in dust. In the center stood a wooden chest, heavy and locked. Its surface was scarred, as if someone had tried to force it open before. My heart raced. I kneeled and examined the chest. The lock was old but intact. My hands shook as I tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. I needed another key. As I searched the shelves, I found folders labeled with dates stretching back decades. Inside were faded letters, receipts, legal papers. But one folder caught my eye, marked in my grandmother's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were photographs. Photographs of people I didn't recognize. One was of a man in uniform, his arm around a young woman who wasn't my grandmother. Another was of a baby, its face blurred with time, but strangely familiar. My stomach lurched. Why would these photos be hidden here? And then I saw it, a letter tucked into the folder. My beloved, I cannot keep this secret much longer. The child is not his. It is yours. Please, come for me before the truth destroys us both. My blood ran cold. The letter wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was my grandmother's. What I had just discovered was unthinkable, a secret that could shatter everything I knew about my family. But this was only the beginning, because when I confronted my grandmother about it, her reaction told me she had been hiding far more than I imagined. Stay tuned for Chapter 3, and before we continue, don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment. What do you think my grandmother's letter really means? Who was the child she was writing about? Imagine discovering a hidden letter from your grandmother that reveals a child nobody ever spoke about. Would you confront her or stay silent? Today, we continue the untold true story of my grandfather. And before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video, because the truth only gets darker from here. I sat alone in the dimly lit study, the letter trembling in my hands. The words on the page swirled in my mind, sharp as knives. The child is not his. It is yours. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was my grandmother's. There was no mistaking it. For years, she had been the strong figure in the family, the one who ruled the house with discipline and quiet authority. But now I wondered who she really was. The photographs on the table seemed to stare back at me. The soldier with the confident smile, the young woman at his side, and that blurred baby, whose face I couldn't quite recognize, yet felt so familiar, it made my chest tighten. Could it be someone I knew? I barely noticed the time as night fell. Shadows grew long across the walls, and the air in the hidden room felt heavier, as though the truth itself pressed down on me. Finally, I tucked the letter into my pocket and made my way upstairs. The house creaked around me. Every step felt like trespassing. When I reached the hallway, I froze. There, at the end of the corridor, stood my grandmother. Her tall figure was silhouetted by the faint light of a lamp. She didn't move. She just watched me. "Why are you down there?" she asked softly, her voice calm, but edged with something sharp. My mouth went dry. She knew I was looking through grandfather's things, I stammered. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she would lash out. Instead, she simply turned and walked into the sitting room. "Come, we must talk. Pause here for a moment. If you found out your grandmother might have hidden an entire secret family, would you confront her directly or pretend you knew nothing? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, hit subscribe and like. This story is only beginning to unfold." I followed her cautiously. The sitting room smelled of lavender and old wood. She lowered herself into a chair, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," she said. I sat across from her, my heart pounding. Grandmother, I found something. A letter. And photographs. Who? Who is the child? Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Then her face returned to stone. You shouldn't have gone into that room, she whispered. I had to, I said. Grandfather wanted me to. He left me the key. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders sagging as though the weight of decades pressed down on her. There are things, she said slowly, that were never meant to be uncovered. Your grandfather knew the truth, but he chose silence. He chose peace. And now you have torn open a wound that was better left to heal. I leaned forward, desperate. Please, just tell me. Who was he? Who was the baby? Her gaze hardened. Some doors should remain closed. The past is not as simple as you think. I pulled the letter from my pocket and placed it on the table. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. Her lips pressed together as she read, her eyes glistening with unspoken memories. Finally, she whispered, he was not supposed to keep this. My breath caught. So it's true? The child was yours? Her silence was louder than any answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her refusal to explain only deepened the mystery. But in my heart, I knew the truth was there, hidden behind her silence, buried under years of discipline and control. The next morning, I returned to the hidden room. I needed more answers. I searched the shelves again, this time more carefully. And at the back of one cabinet, behind a stack of yellowed papers, I found another box. Inside were letters exchanged between my grandfather and a man named James Whitaker. The letters spoke of land deals, of promises, of debts repaid. But buried among them was one letter that stood out. Samuel, the boy must never know. If he learns the truth, it will destroy him. It is better this way. For his sake, for all of ours. Samuel was my grandfather's name. The boy? Was that me? Friends, let me stop here and ask you, if you discovered hidden letters saying your grandfather had kept a secret about you, would you keep reading or walk away? Let me know in the comments. And remember, your likes and shares help me keep bringing these untold true stories to life. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Could the child my grandmother had written about actually be connected to me? I confronted her again that evening, but this time her response was colder. You are meddling in things you cannot understand, she said firmly. Leave it alone. For your own good. Her warning felt less like protection and more like a threat. But the more she resisted, the more determined I became. Days passed as I combed through my grandfather's documents. Each discovery painted a darker picture. There were records of secret bank accounts, unsigned letters, and even receipts for properties bought in other towns. Properties no one in the family had ever mentioned. One file contained a birth certificate. My hands trembled as I read the faded ink. A boy, born in 1956, the mother's name, Margaret. The father's name, left blank. Margaret was my grandmother's name. The child had no father listed, but the surname given wasn't mine. What I held in my hands changed everything. My grandmother had a child the family never spoke of, and his name wasn't ours. Who was he? Where was he? And why had my grandfather hidden the truth for so long? In Chapter 4, the search for this lost child begins, and what I uncover will tear the family apart. Don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment below. What do you think happened to the boy whose name was erased from our history? Imagine finding a birth certificate that proves your grandmother had a child nobody ever mentioned. Would you stop digging? Or would you chase the truth even if it tore your family apart? Today, in this untold true story of my grandfather, the search for the forgotten child begins. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because this story only gets darker. The certificate lay on my desk, its corners curled, its ink faded by time. But the name was there, not mine, not anyone's I recognized. A boy, born in 1956, to my grandmother Margaret. The father, blank. I stared at it for hours, my mind looping through every family story I'd ever heard. Nobody had spoken of another child. My grandmother always spoke of her only son, my father. But now I knew that wasn't true. I whispered the name aloud. It felt foreign, strange, almost dangerous on my tongue. Thomas Whitaker, not our family name. Not connected to us. At least not officially, but the letters I'd found proved otherwise. My grandfather had known. He had chosen to protect the secret. And now, it seemed, it had fallen on me to uncover it. I began searching through the town archives. The clerk gave me puzzled looks as I requested documents from the 1950s, but I persisted. Hours turned into days as I combed through birth records, school registers, even old church attendance logs. At last, I found him. Thomas Whitaker, enrolled in the local primary school in 1962, attended for 3 years. And then, nothing. His name disappeared. No further records. No marriage, no death, no tax filings. It was as if he had vanished. I confronted my grandmother again. The old woman sat in her chair, the evening light casting shadows across her lined face. "You found him, didn't you?" she said quietly. Before I could even speak, my breath caught. Thomas, who was he? Where did he go? Her eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, regret. He was my son, but he was not your grandfather's. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, I asked, "Then who?" Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Instead, she whispered, "Leave it alone. The past is buried for a reason. If you discovered your family had erased an entire child from history, would you honor their silence or expose the truth? Comment below what you do. And don't forget, hit subscribe and like. Your support keeps these untold stories alive. I couldn't let it rest. That night, I dug deeper into my grandfather's hidden room. Behind a stack of ledgers, I found a small wooden box tied with frayed string. Inside, folded carefully, was a photograph. It showed my grandmother, younger, holding a small boy. Her smile was forced, tight, and standing just behind her, barely visible, was a man I didn't recognize. His hand rested on her shoulder. On the back of the photo, in my grandfather's handwriting, were the words, "He will never know." I felt my blood run cold. Who was the man in the photo? Was he Thomas's father? The next morning, I visited an elderly neighbor who had lived beside my grandparents for decades. Mrs. Caldwell, frail but sharp-eyed, welcomed me into her kitchen. When I mentioned Thomas, her spoon clattered against the saucer. "My dear," she whispered, "I thought everyone had forgotten him. They never spoke his name after he was taken away." My pulse quickened. Taken away? By who? She shook her head. "I don't know the details. One day, he was there. The next, gone. Your grandfather swore us all to silence. He was." Persuasive. Her words haunted me as I walked home. Taken away. Erased. Why? I returned to the chest one more time, desperate for answers. This time, I found a sealed envelope tucked beneath the false bottom. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter addressed to my father. "If you are reading this, then the truth has reached you. You were never meant to bear this burden. Your brother's existence was hidden to protect you, to protect us all. What happened to him cannot be undone. But remember this, family is not only blood, it is choice. And I chose you." My eyes blurred with tears. My father had a brother, my grandmother's son. My grandfather had hidden him. And now Decades later, I was holding the truth in my hands, but the letter gave no clue as to what had happened to Thomas. Only that he was gone. Friends, imagine this. You discover your father had a brother nobody told you about. Would you search for him? Or would you leave the past buried? Comment below. And remember, your likes, shares, and subscriptions keep me going as I unravel these untold true stories of my grandfather. The search consumed me. I traveled to nearby towns, checked adoption records, spoke to priests and teachers who might have remembered. Some looked away. Others whispered. A few warned me. Some secrets are dangerous. Finally, I found a clue. In a forgotten file at the county orphanage, there was a record of a boy named Thomas Whitaker, admitted in 1965. The file was thin, almost empty, but it listed a guardian who signed him in. Samuel. My grandfather. Why would he send his wife's child away? And more importantly, where had Thomas gone after that? When I returned home, I confronted my grandmother one last time. Please, I begged. I found the orphanage record. I know grandfather sent him away. Tell me the truth. Where is he now? Her face crumpled. Tears, real and raw, spilled down her cheeks. You don't understand, she whispered. Thomas wasn't safe here. Your grandfather. He made a choice. A cruel choice. But he believed it was the only way. My voice shook. What choice? She looked at me with hollow eyes. To send him away forever. To erase him. To make sure no one would ever find him. And that's where chapter 4 ends. My grandmother finally confessed. My grandfather erased Thomas, sent him away, and ordered silence. But where did Thomas go? Is he alive? And why was he considered a danger to the family? In chapter 5, I follow the trail across towns, through forgotten orphanages and faded records, until I uncover the shocking truth. Don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Do you think Thomas survived? Or was he lost forever? What would you do if you discovered your grandfather erased an entire person from history, your own uncle? In this untold true story of my grandfather, the hunt for Thomas takes me deeper into secrets more dangerous than I ever imagined. But before I reveal what I found, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Your support helps me keep uncovering these stories. The morning after my grandmother's tearful confession, I couldn't sit still. Every sound in the house seemed to echo with hidden meaning. Every photograph on the walls whispered, "He is missing." I spread out the documents I had collected across my desk. The birth certificate with my grandmother's name. The school records ending. Abruptly dot the photograph with the stranger's hand on her shoulder. The orphanage file, signed by my grandfather himself. The pattern was clear. Thomas had been deliberately hidden, step by step, until his existence dissolved into silence. But the orphanage record was my only thread left. I had to pull it. The old county orphanage no longer existed. The building had been sold years ago, converted into private apartments. But some of the files had been moved to the state archive. The archivist, a tired man with round glasses, flipped through index cards until his fingers stopped on a thin folder. He slid it across the desk to me. Got inside were just 3 pages. Admission record, 1965. Guardian, Samuel Whitaker. Child, Thomas Whitaker. Age 9. Health examination, 1966. Notes, healthy, quiet, reserved. Transfer record, 1967. Destination, confidential. That was all. Confidential? I asked the archivist. He shrugged. Back then, certain children were placed in private care. Wealthy families, religious orders, even experimental programs. Sometimes the details weren't written down or deliberately obscured. His words chilled me. My grandfather had power, influence, and secrets. Had he used them to erase Thomas permanently? I decided to seek out the nuns who had once worked at the orphanage. Through sheer persistence, I found one, Sister Agnes, now retired, frail, but still sharp. She sat across from me in her small, sunlit kitchen, hands folded. "Thomas," she said softly, when I showed her the photo. Yes, a sweet boy. Sad eyes. He never spoke much, but he clung to a small wooden toy horse everywhere he went. My breath caught. "Do you know what happened to him?" She lowered her gaze. "I remember the day he left. A man arrived. Not your grandfather, someone else. He wore a dark suit, carried papers. He said Thomas was being placed in a special home. We weren't to ask questions. The next day, Thomas was gone. Imagine finding out your lost uncle was taken away by strangers, with your family's blessing. Would you stop searching, or risk everything to know the truth? Comment what you would do. And please don't forget to subscribe and like. It helps me continue sharing these untold true stories of my grandfather, the toy horse. Her words burned into my mind. I remembered a broken wooden figure I had seen once in my grandfather's study, tucked behind books. Had it belonged to Thomas? Had he kept it as a reminder of the child he sent away? The image haunted me. I pressed further. One tracked down former social workers, priests, even government clerks who might have handled private adoptions in the late 1960s. Some doors slammed in my face. Others gave me cryptic warnings. Let the past rest. You don't want to know who was involved. Your grandfather's shadow was long. Each refusal only hardened my resolve. At last, in a forgotten corner of the diocesan archive, I found a ledger, handwritten, dusty, ignored for decades. And there it was. Whitaker, Thomas. Transferred 1967, gives St. Bartholomew's Home for Boys. Location, undisclosed. The entry was underlined twice, as if someone had wanted to mark it or conceal it. I copied the reference and began my search. Days passed. Then finally, I found it. St. Bartholomew's Home for Boys had once been a remote religious institution, far outside the city. The building now stood abandoned. The journey to the crumbling structure felt like stepping into a nightmare. Broken windows gaped like empty eyes. Weeds swallowed the steps. Inside, dust lay thick on rotting floorboards, and the smell of mildew and decay filled the air. But scattered papers still remained, fragments of lives once lived here. Roster lists, health notes, punishment records. And then, at the bottom of a drawer, a file with his name, Thomas Whitaker. Inside notes about his progress, comments about his silence, his tendency to draw pictures instead of speak, a record of punishments for disobedience, and then the last entry, dated 1969, child transferred to private custody. Guardian, redacted. Destination, confidential. Once again, erased. Every time I thought I was close to finding Thomas, the trail ended in the word confidential. What would you do in my place? Keep searching, or accept he was lost forever? Let me know in the comments. And remember, subscribe, like, and share to keep these stories alive. But there was something else in the file. Folded inside, nearly crumbling, was a drawing. A small, childish sketch of a horse. The same wooden toy Sister Agnes had described. My throat tightened. Thomas had left a piece of himself here. That night, I sat alone with the file spread before me. The pattern was undeniable. Born in silence. Hidden in school. Sent to an orphanage. Transferred to a religious home. Disappeared. Again into private custody. Each step was deliberate. Each erasure carefully orchestrated. But why? Why was a child, innocent and silent, treated like a danger? I returned once more to my grandmother. I placed the drawing on her lap. Her hands trembled. Her lips quivered. He never stopped drawing that horse, she whispered, even when Samuel punished him. Why? I demanded. Why was he sent away again and again? Why was he erased? Her tears fell onto the paper. Because he was not only my shame, she said. He was proof. Proof of something your grandfather swore must never come to light. And that's where chapter 5 ends. My grandmother finally admitted it. Thomas wasn't just a forgotten child. He was living proof of a secret so dangerous, my grandfather erased him from existence. But what was that secret? In chapter 6, the truth will finally surface, and it will tear the family apart forever. Don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment what you think the proof really was. What if the secret your grandfather hid all his life was not about wealth, but about blood? In this untold true story of my grandfather, the search for Thomas ends with a revelation so shocking, it shattered everything I thought I knew. Before we dive in, don't forget, subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts. This chapter is the one you've been waiting for. The night after my grandmother's last confession, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept circling in my mind. He was proof. Proof of what? Proof of betrayal? Proof of a crime? Proof of a love affair? The questions gnawed at me until dawn. I began scouring every document, every letter, every photograph once more. At last, hidden inside my grandfather's Bible, I found a folded page so fragile it nearly disintegrated. It was a letter, unsigned, but unmistakably written in my grandmother's hand. Samuel, you cannot ask me to bury this forever. He is still my son, even if not yours. You said the world can never know whose blood he carries. But how long can we live with this lie? How long can we destroy him to protect ourselves? My hands trembled. The missing piece fell into place. Thomas was not only my grandmother's shame, he was evidence. Evidence of who my grandmother had lain with, and of the child that union produced. I went back to the photograph, the one of my grandmother holding Thomas with the stranger's hand on her shoulder. For days I studied it, compared it to faces in old records, until finally a match emerged. The man was not a stranger. He was a powerful figure from the town's past, a man my grandfather had once worked under. His reputation had been spotless, until whispers of corruption drove him quietly into obscurity. And suddenly, I understood. If Thomas's father was that man, it meant scandal. It meant disgrace. It meant my grandfather had raised another man's child in his house, until his pride snapped, and he erased him. Friends, let me ask you, if you discovered your grandmother had a child with another man, and your grandfather buried the truth by erasing him, would you expose it to the world? Or protect the family's name? Comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe and like for more untold true stories. Truth was almost unbearable, but I needed more. I needed to know what became of Thomas. Following the trail from St. Bartholomew's home, I discovered a network of institutions, places where children were rehomed under new names. Most files were lost, but a single note mentioned a transfer to a rural farm outside the county. I went there, decades later. The farm was long abandoned, but the neighbors remembered. Yes, one old man said, leaning on his cane. There was a boy, quiet, worked hard. They called him Tommy, never smiled. One day, men came and took him away. Never saw him again. The pattern repeated. Every clue led to another disappearance, another shadow dot, until finally, in a hospice record, I found the name, Thomas Whitaker. Or rather, Thomas Green, his adopted name. He had lived under it for years, drifting from place to place, until illness claimed him in his 40s. The final note. No known relatives. Buried in an unmarked grave, I sat with that record for hours, tears blurring my eyes. He had lived and died alone, forgotten. A ghost erased by pride, by secrecy, by fear. But then, tucked inside his file, was something that made my heart shatter. A small envelope. Inside, a folded paper. A drawing, the same horse. The same child's hand. Faded, fragile, but still there. On the back, in faint pencil, were the words, "For Mother." Someday she'll find me. Imagine finding a note from a lost uncle, written decades ago, hoping his mother would find him. Would you show it to your grandmother, even if it broke her heart? Tell me in the comments. And remember, hit subscribe, like, and share if this story has touched you. When I showed my grandmother the note, she wept as I had never seen before. Her frail body shook with grief that had been married for half a century. She pressed the drawing to her lips, whispering his name again and again. "I told Samuel we should never send him away," she cried. "I told him a mother cannot forget. But Samuel was stronger than me, stronger and colder." She clutched my hand. "You must forgive me. I let him be taken. I let them erase him. But now, you've brought him back to me." For the first time, I saw her not as the stern matriarch, but as a broken woman who had lost her child. And in that moment, I realized my grandfather's legacy was not just land or wealth or reputation. It was scars. Scars that stretched across generations. Thomas's story was not only his. It was ours. A reminder that secrets rot families from within. That pride can destroy more than poverty ever could. And that, friends, is where this untold true story of my grandfather ends. Thomas lived and died in silence, but through these letters, drawings, and whispers of history, his voice has finally been heard. Tell me in the comments, do you believe families should reveal every secret, no matter how painful, or are some truths better left buried? And don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and comment. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive. My grandfather once wrote, "Trust no one, not even those you love." But I believe the truth is this: if you cannot trust your own family with the truth, then you have no family at all. Thomas may have been erased from records, but not from memory. And now, not from history.